Hi guys, Youngblood with you for another episode of The Inbox, and we're starting off with a question today from Jared Kellerman, asking probably a stupid question. I've already bought a 315p because I want to go discover something and it sounds like fun. He's worried that he's not going to be able to keep up with a Carrack, so anything that's worth being discovered is probably already going to be discovered by a Carrack before he can even get there. He says that I might just be misunderstanding the exploration portion of this game, but wants to know if the 315 was a bad buy. So to address this, we need to get more information from CIG about the exploration mechanics, but just because you're in a smaller craft doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be more limited than a bigger craft. When it comes to exploration, one of the things that's going to be a factor is the ability to fit through certain jump points, and the Carrack is a really large ship. So it may have to take additional jumps to get to another location that you could then get to in a small craft. Now, the Carrack is going to have some benefits that you're not going to have in a 315. It's specifically made to be kind of a pathfinder craft. It's going to have some benefits in finding and mapping new jump points. It also has a snub-nosed craft, so it can actually go out and do some additional exploration. That being said, though, there's some very big limitations to the Carrack. One was going to be crew size. If you want to operate at a full efficiency in a Carrack, you're going to need buddies or you're going to have to pay for NPCs to be able to really operate the pilot seat. You're going to have somebody on scanners. You're probably going to have somebody at the command station. You're going to want somebody in the snub-nosed craft. Right there, we're talking about 4 people, and that's not even talking about things like shield management or power management. So the crew size is a major factor on the Carrack. Now, if you have a fully crewed Carrack, it's going to do an excellent job at doing exploration. But a 315 is a one-man craft that's capable of doing exploration. And a lot of exploration, my guess, is going to be tied to knowing where to look, knowing what to do, having good intuition, and frankly, probably some luck. So just because you're in a smaller craft doesn't mean you're going to do worse. If you're a good explorer, if you kind of dive in and learn the things that you're supposed to look for, then you're going to have a really good opportunity to find some really cool things. It's a cheaper option to buy initially and to maintain ongoing, and that includes things like fuel. So no, the 315 is not a bad buy at all. And ultimately, you want to get a ship that you're comfortable using in whatever your situation is. So if you're a solo player, a 315 is absolutely a better buy for you as compared to a Carrack, where you may end up needing to spend more just to get some NPCs to help you be at full efficiency. Joshua Greathouse says, speaking of the Reclaimer, will you release an updated video on it once we get more information on it? Yes, anytime we get more information about ships, I think that's kind of one of the bread and butters of my channel, is kind of reviewing ships and providing people with information to make educated decisions about it. And part of that's going to be reviewing it whenever we get that information. So the Reclaimer is a ship that came out that has a ton of interest. I think a lot of people have more interest in the Reclaimer than just about any other ship, just purely based on the number of views I have on my Reclaimer video as compared to some of the other new releases. So the Reclaimer is a really large ship. It's got a really unique gameplay aspect to it. There's not a whole lot of salvage information in this game yet. So having a ship that's really focused on that's going to have people really interested. So once we get more information, I'll be talking about that. Once we actually get it hangar ready, we'll be doing a tour of the ship. Once it's flight ready and the mechanics for salvage are in, we'll be doing it. So yes, whenever we get Reclaimer information, you can absolutely count on videos from me about it. Vanilla Doe says, when will Mr. Redeemer be accessible? I really want it because firepower. It's a good reason to want the Redeemer. It's a gunboat. It's got a ton of weapons on it. My gut says it's going to be a little while on the Redeemer. It's scheduled to get another update pass. It needs to go through the new ship pipeline. So we're going to probably see some changes to the interior, the space utilization. We're probably going to see less polygons on it to make it more efficient in the game engine. And we may end up getting more modularity as far as what can actually be used in that bottom bay, where right now you have those seats. We may end up having like a cargo option or maybe holding cells for bounty hunting, those types of things. So there's going to be more information and updates to the Redeemer. We just don't have an established timeline on when that's going to happen yet. But the Redeemer is probably one of my most anticipated ships, so I'm right there with you. I want it. I've got it. I want to get that thing up and see how it actually flies too. Salamander Helix says, hey STL, would you ever do a Star Citizen podcast? I get this question every once in a while, and the answer is maybe. Now, the series I'm doing right here, the Inbox, is almost like a podcast, so I might get to a point where I end up, just running that into an MP3 and hosting it somewhere. But there's a couple things that I want to consider. YouTube is my bread and butter. It's where I spend my time. It's where I put my efforts into content creation. And I'm rewarded through that, through seeing subscribers grow, through views, creating revenue, like those sorts of things. So doing a standalone podcast kind of takes away from that audience. Now, it also gives the opportunity to expand your audience as well. So it's kind of a dichotomy of what the benefit is towards the effort. So if I'm doing content that's in a podcast, it may not end up, generating revenue for me or views for me. And those types of things help to generate or improve your channel standing on YouTube, helping to increase your audience. So the answer is I've considered it. I've had a lot of people request it. It's something that I'll probably end up doing. I just need to find the way to do it. And another thing is, now with the new baby around the house, I need to find the time to do something like that. So I don't want to commit and say that it's going to happen, but it is sort of in the background of things that I've been considering. Shadow Tales the Warrior says, what do you think about the Mustang Delta's capability as a ground attack spacecraft? And I assume what you're talking about here is attacking targets on the ground, like a tank or a rover, those sorts of things. And I think the Delta is probably one of the better options if we get to a point where that's a place. If you've got infantry on the ground or if you've got tanks on the ground. One of the most challenging things about using the Delta is actually landing the rocket pods onto your target. And part of that's because you've got, 6 degrees of movement on your ships, up, down, left, right, forward, back. When you're on the ground, it's really forward, backwards, left, or right. You don't have the up or down. So it's an easier target to actually hit using those dumbfire missiles. So I think from that perspective, the Delta has a really unique setup that could make it really good at attacking ground craft. But that's pure speculation at this point, since we don't really know what that's going to look like in Star Citizen or what that's going to, how long it's going to be until that's implemented. But theoretically, yes, if you have a target on the ground, the Delta can carry a lot of weapons. It's relatively agile. It flies well. And with the dumbfire rockets, it's a really good option. So yes, I think it's a really good choice for that. Ardent Defender says, speaking of the Herald, since I own one and it's been an info runner, I'm really curious about how it's going to work with info and data packages. I'm wondering if the info to transmit is officially coded in some way to the ship or transmitter, that when it transmits between 2 points, it's also updated or archived somewhere automatically, maybe like the ARC. Because the question is, how do you circumvent in-game chat and voice in some way? Like, hey guys, or corporation, I found a dead bangle in Eric's system and around the 12 moon of Archon 9. How do you circumvent info like that being transmitted with a Herald? Okay, so it's kind of a confusing question, so if I don't get it right, let me know in the comments and I'll try and clarify how I'm going to answer this. But primarily, the information that you're getting on the Herald, the idea of the Herald is that you can take information and store it on your ship and then drive it or fly it to a different location. And the fact that it's not being broadcast out over the airwaves means that you've got a better opportunity of that information being secure. Now, the Herald does have the ability to do transmittal. It's got the dish on it for you to actually do that. That being said, it's probably not necessarily the best way to actually transmit that information just because it's not as secure. So when we talk about stealing information and that purpose of like securely transporting that information in a ship that's built for speed, having it auto update to a location like the ARC is probably a bad idea because you're making your information publicly available at that point, and that's hurting your profits. You want to take that information and sell it. Now, is there a possibility that you want to be a humanitarian and share everything that you've got with the community? Maybe. And maybe that's an opportunity or an option for you to actually do auto uploads to the ARC. But I don't think that's what the real purpose of the ship is. So I don't think that's going to work. Now, when you start talking about, in-game versus out-of-game and how you protect the information, that's one of the things that I've mentioned in a few videos that I really want to see details on. Because if people can intercept information, or if they can use electronic warfare to break up your communication through the in-game communication channel, what is there to prevent people from using Mumble or TeamSpeak or Ventrilo or Discord to actually have those communications that aren't going to be impacted? It's not as immersive, and it's not going to be as, quote-unquote, fair. But if you're talking about surviving and doing the best that you can in-game, it's really hard to argue with using one of those utilities. So there needs to be really good in-game utilities that encourage you to use them. whether that be like position pings, so when somebody's talking, you know exactly where they're at, or whether you get higher quality information. There needs to be something to encourage you to use the in-game system for working with your organization. And that's one of the challenges that I think they're going to have to work through, and something that I'm going to want to see. Leo Anderberg says, hey, Youngblood, I want a good two-person ship. Not in the so much spray rum. I was thinking about the Cutlass. The Cutlass is going to be a good, small, multi-crew ship. It's got the ability to do a lot of different things. Now, it's going to be interesting when it goes through the rework because it's being balanced. It wasn't flying right. It wasn't doing combat the right way. But it's got a lot of versatility going for it, and it should still be a decent heavy attack craft or a good, decent combat capable, like small freighter type of deal. So with that in mind, I still think the Cutlass is a really good option. Now, if you're talking about combat, something like a Super Hornet's technically a two-person craft, and it's going to do really well. If you're talking about pure hauling, then a Freelancer Max is probably going to do better than the Cutlass. So when you're talking about what you want to do with a two-person ship, I need to know a little bit more about your specific goals that you have in mind. And then on the really cheaper end of the scale, like a Reliant would be a really good option too. So it kind of depends, what your price range is, what your real goal is. But overall, versatility in roles, I think a Cutlass is a really good option for you. Paulie Meister says, hey, Youngblood, what do you think about the killing potential with the Sabre compared to the Hornet? Always like the looks of the Sabre, always looks like the Sabre is dealing no damage at all compared to the Hornet, just wrecks people. I really want to get the Sabre at some point, but the ship seems to be not the fighter that I'm looking for. There really are two different ships, but when we actually look at the Sabre, it is an incredibly capable fighter. And a lot of it's just going to come down to what you arm it with. If you're talking about the ability to bring 4 fixed size 3 weapons on a ship that's fast, agile, relatively durable, and has stealth capabilities, the Sabre is a really, really good option. Now, the Hornet is kind of king of Arena Commander right now because you can kit it out with some really good weapons. It's incredibly durable. It's not the fastest ship out there, but when you have armor and armament, those are the two real keys in Arena Commander right now. Speed's the other one, but if you've got 2 out of 3, you're doing pretty well. But try not to look at Arena Commander too much as what it's going to be like in the Persistent Universe, because the Persistent Universe has different IFCS modes, so you could go into cruise and boost away and then come back and change the way you're dictating engagements. You can also use things like asteroids or other ships to kind of hide your signature. In Arena Commander, we just don't really have that right now, not to mention we're kind of limited in what size of ships are actually capable. So I think the Sabre is an outstanding option. I love flying the Sabre. It's an absolute beast. And while I think the Hornet does better in Arena Commander, overall, once we get into the Persistent Universe, they're both going to kind of find their niche and they're both going to do really well. And for today's last question is from Nias. Says, let's say you're a pirate and you see a few bounty hunters coming to you. Can't you just quickly log out of the game? How do you think they're going to prevent that? Combat logging is a huge issue in games. And in Elite Dangerous, it was one of the things that would piss people off more than just about anything else. Now, there's some different things that you can try and put into the game. So, for example, like Elite Dangerous, a combat log took you right out of the game. But if you were to actually hit escape and go to exit game, if you were in combat, it would say there was a cooldown timer. I think what we're going to have in Star Citizen is things like your ship will automatically fly to the nearest station, but you're going to be engaged if you see that trouble coming for you. It's always a problem, and it's something that CIG is going to need to implement. My guess is it's probably going to be something tied to like a threat system. If there's enough enemies around that could end up killing you, it may not let you log out at that point, or it's going to just leave your ship sitting there as basically a dead stick while you're trying to cheat out on dying. There's going to be some things like that. Now, in Star Citizen, at least with what we have right now, and at least until we get interdiction systems in place, you could technically just go into cruise mode or just quantum drive away, get to some really safe place, and then log out. That's a kind of a slightly more honorable way of running away and just avoiding the fight. And that's not really that different from, if you're a pirate and you see a few bounty hunters come, you may not want to get into that fight anyway, so you would run at that point as well. So there needs to be a balance in-game of how they're going to prevent that from happening. I know it's something on their list of things that they're going to work out. It's just going to be something we need to see. And I think with persistence coming and getting more and more developed, it's going to be a really important thing for them to figure out. So that's going to be it for today's episode. If you have more questions, put them in the comments. I'll get to them. I'm about 10 episodes behind right now, so if you don't get your question answered right away, it will be answered. Otherwise, thanks for watching. Have yourselves a wonderful day, and I'll talk to you guys later. Take care.